By now, many of you have heard about the Sakoma Sturko controversy that's been making waves within the Conservative Party of BC and raising eyebrows among many of its party supporters who have been left wondering, is the party the grassroots Conservatives they had hoped for? Surrey Cloverdale MLA Elenore Sturko, who brought with her a history of championing sex activism during her on-duty time as an RCMP officer when she crossed the floor over to the Tories, is at the center of the controversy due to her decision to take to the CBC to commend the cancel culture-driven resignation of Miss Comfort Sakoma from her now former vice chair of the Vancouver Police Board position. Why? Because Sakoma expressed pro-Canada, conservative, Christian views on her personal Instagram. And the left, and I guess so-called conservative Sturko, don't like that. You can learn more about Sakoma's very centrist comments by clicking on the written article for this report, linked in the description box below. But for now, in short, despite the party's principles of free speech and parental rights, Sturko publicly labeled Sakoma's common sense belief that parents shouldn't have to live in fear of being imprisoned in Canada for opposing an affirm all things trans or else approach to their child's sudden onset gender dysphoria as being offensive to the transgender community and making duty harder for frontline officers. And after weeks of Sakoma's name continuing to be dragged through the media's mud and no retraction or apology from Sturko, the public got a glimpse into the moral divide brewing within the party due to a letter addressed to the BC Conservative Party leader John Rustad by 13 of his own MLAs, calling on him to restore confidence in the core values of the Conservatives caucus. That letter was leaked. And since then, Ms. Sturko has dug her heels in deeper with her position via a statement on social media after Rustad used the same platform to come out in support of Sakoma's freedom to express conservative beliefs and his condemnation of the board's acceptance of her pressured recognition and a recommendation for Sturko to meet with Sakoma. But is that enough? And Sturko won't do that, by the way, so what should be done, if anything, about the party's seemingly rogue MLA? Unlike Ms. Sturko, who has avoided answering any of my inquiries regarding this matter, Mr. Rustad joined me for an interview to answer some tough questions I knew you'd want me to ask him. I'm Drea Humphrey with Rebel News, and here is Mr. Rustad. And joining us now is Mr. John Rustad, the official opposition leader and leader of the Conservative Party of BC. Thanks for being back on Rebel News.
Drea, thank you for having me on today.
Now, the party has been making many headlines associated with what I'm calling the Sakoma Sturko controversy. And so a lot of our viewers wanted me to sit down and figure out what the heck has been going on. So, I'm glad to talk to you about that. Let's start with the so-called leaked letter that came out. And in that letter, there were 13 of your MLAs who were addressing you. And they were saying that they pointed out that under your leadership, the Conservative Party of BC has consistently denounced cancel culture and stood for the charter rights of freedoms and enjoy the expression and freedom of religion, etc. They point out that one of your first things that you did in the House was to sort of take a stand for parental rights and its connection to SOGI. But they say that Miss Elenore Sturko's words, and I suppose at this point, lack of an apology for them, they don't believe that aligns with the Conservative Party, and they called on you to invite Ms. Sturko to offer Ms. Sakoma a written apology, and if she didn't, for you to sort of do it on the party's half as a whole. So I guess my first question to that, because I've already told people watching this that you did, in fact, come out and make a statement. Why did it take until after this letter came out for you to do so?
Well, there's just some issues that needed to be addressed in terms of my ability and timing to be able to get together with Comfort Sakoma. But I find it interesting in terms of that letter, and I talked about this with many of my colleagues. what does it mean to have free speech? What does it mean to stand up for freedom and rights? And I obviously, if speech is hate, if speech is racism, that's a no-go. That is, you can't defend that. But if somebody says something I disagree with, and it's their right to say it, shouldn't I defend their right to say it, even if I disagree with what was said? And if I'm not, aren't I just participating in cancel culture? And so, to me, it's very important to stand up for what's right. And if you're going to stand up for freedom of speech, if you're going to stand up for MLAs having the ability to have individual voices, that means there are going to be differences. And you're going to have to accept that some people are going to say things that I may personally disagree with. And to me, that's what I think is important. So if free speech is a value, is a core value, is who we are and what we need to do, and cancel culture is something we want to avoid and something we don't want to be partake in, then we should be just as passionate about that within ourselves as we are about attacking the left that tends to use this quite frequently.
Well, I agree. There definitely can be a thin line. Many people tend to look at the left as this sort of cancel culture mobsters. So where do you draw the line? It's also not lost on me that you yourself were put in a position to apologize or else when you were with the BC United, and you didn't apologize, and that got you the boot. But when it comes to a party, and a party gives its members, its supporters, sort of the values or the principles that they stand for, is it a matter of free speech if a then candidate goes out and sort of says the opposite of that? Is that the same thing?
Well, that's an interesting thing. As a political party, do you want all of your candidates or do you want all of your MLAs to be saying the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to whip them and say, this is what you have to say and you're not allowed to say anything other than that? Mm-hmm. Or do you want to accept the fact that some people may say something that you may not agree with? And so that's an interesting challenge. And all the other political parties whip their MLAs. They say, this is what you can say. You're limited to this. You have to stay to these lines. And I'm trying to do things different. Mm-hmm. Now, that means there's going to be some challenges. There's no question. And I think, part of, being a leader is to set the tone in terms of who we are and what we're doing and making sure that, people have that direction. But it also has to be able to allow people to have differences. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we're just the BC Liberals or the NDP.
I'll get more to asking about that question a little later. But as a Rebel News reporter, I take pride and I feel that Rebel News sort of fills a void in Canada that's very needed. Sometimes we are always covering the other side of the story, but sometimes we even dabble into a little bit of activism when it seems like nobody is saying what should be done. I bring this up because sometimes we actually call for politicians to resign and things like that, usually when they break, a code or something like that. So I just wanted to say I did not put together a journalistic campaign against Sturko for doing that. But here's one thing that does still keep me perplexed. If we move away from the free speech, I have, of course, reached out to Ms. Sturko many times on this issue. What is confusing to me is that I absolutely can't find anything in the statements that Ms. Sakoma did say that were, in fact, offensive to the transgender community, or even more strangely, some way anti-police. Yeah. So what is your response to that? And is that not something that perhaps Ms. Sturko should take accountability for?
So I did meet with Comfort Sakoma, and I walked through, what she had said and listened to what her intent was, and what I found is I didn't find anything there that was worthy of dismissal. Mm-hmm. Certainly nothing that was worthy of asking her to resign. Now, she came out with some strong values in terms of where her beliefs were, but it was nothing that was I found to be derogatory or to attack or to challenge anybody else as part of it. And so that's why I came out with the statement and said I met with her. Still seems to be a wonderful lady. A little bit I got to know her. She's a very good cook. So which I was very pleased with, right? She's offered to send me her recipe in terms of the meal that we had, which is good, because I do like to cook, obviously. But and that's when I also said, that I think it would be of value if Elenore would want to meet with her and have a conversation like I did. But it was up to her. So, if she doesn't want to do that, that's okay too. I wasn't going to say you have to do this because, like I say, we're trying to do things different, and maybe we shouldn't be doing things different as a political party. But we're trying to show that politics can be different in British Columbia.
Mm-hmm. So Ms. Sturko also almost immediately made a statement. As soon as you did yours, it seemed like a blink on X before hers was up. She said she would not be apologizing or meeting with Ms. Sakoma in some sort of reconciliation attempt, I guess, and that she would continue to focus on, tackling some of the things she has been successfully tackling, in particular, our lack of cracking down on our drug overdoses and crime and things like that. My look at that is, why didn't you just stick to that? Why did you stick your nose out here and, in my opinion, say things that are unfounded about Sakoma? But moving on from that, some concerns were raised about sort of the reaction or apparent reaction that came from the party, which you lead, following that letter getting out. One of those concerns are the termination of Tim Thielman, a former MLA candidate for Victoria Beacon Hill, and who was hired by your party to do researching for the caucus for his role in that letter. Can you clarify what his role was? And what's your response to people, including former board member, I'm forgetting the title right here, and also former MLA, if I'm not mistaken, in the riding against Premier David Eby, Paul Ratchford, who's made a statement?
First of all, Tim Thielman was hired by our caucus to do work on behalf of our caucus. And because that is an HR issue, it's not something that I'm prepared to talk about with the media. So I apologize for that. and I respect him. I respect his views. And I also respect the work that he has done for us and as him as being a candidate. And so, but that's as far as I can go in terms of saying that. So, Paul was unhappy about that. Paul Ratchford who was our former candidate in that riding, and that's his right. If that's what he's concerned about in terms of that. However, that doesn't change that I'm not going to talk about an HR issue in the media.
Is another sign that your party lacks the vision and fortitude necessary to aggressively and unflinchingly shrink the state, stand firm in conservative values, and massively improve the quality of life for everyday British Columbians. It somewhat aligns with concerns that Sakoma raised in her statement following you meeting with her and Elenore speaking, where she actually questions whether or not Miss Elenore Sturko is a Manchurian candidate. Is there some sort of movement that the BC Liberals, BC United is coming back from the dead and trying to take over the BC Conservatives?
I gotta love conspiracy theories.
Don't we all?
So, first of all, Mr. Ratchford was candidate. He ran hard, didn't win. He's very upset about that. Feels that our party could have been different. I've seen that time and time again in all the years of politics. People that leave politics, and one of the most famous lines that I hear from just about every politician that leaves politics says, "If they had only listened to me." And that's the reality. And I get it. He's upset in terms of where he thinks the world should be. But what's worth noting is the Conservative Party of British Columbia, we ran on the most conservative platform of any Conservative party in this country. We achieved things that no other Conservative party has been able to do. And when you look at the base of who we are as the Conservative Party, that the ethnic minorities, the groups that came in to be part of who we are as a Conservative Party, we in many ways redefine what it is to be conservative in this country and certainly in this province. And so I'm very proud of that, right? And elected, went from 0 to 44, elected the largest caucus, opposition caucus this province has ever had, elected the largest percentage of women as a percentage of caucus that any Conservative Party in the country has ever done. I mean, there's a lot of things that we did as part of this. And one thing I do know, and I think W.A.C. Bennett put it best way back when, the job of the leader and the job of the party should be to always be making the tent bigger. That doesn't mean that we run on a different platform. That doesn't mean that we aren't trying to, support parental rights and get rid of the sexualization of kids in schools, or fight to make sure that we've got choice in healthcare and bodily autonomy. I mean, it doesn't mean we change those values that we're fighting for, but at the same time, is there room for other people to be part of who we are, and is there room for disagreements from time to time? And that's something that, as a Conservative Party, and certainly as a leader, I want to try to make sure we have that room. And it's not that we are compromising who we are, because we aren't. We are Conservatives. We are the Conservative Party of British Columbia. But having said that, like I say, I think we need to be able to be a big enough tent to make sure that we can have the broad enough base to attract people from across the spectrum to vote for us. It's one of the reasons, for example, I was very proud that we had a former NDP MLA run for us on the island. She thought enough is enough with what's going on with the drugs, with what's going on in our schools, and she wanted to try to make a difference. And I was very proud that she stepped up and ran for us and was part of our group.
Well, there you have it. Almost premier. John Rustad, leader of the Conservative Party of BC, and his comments to some of the concerns many of you have about what's been going on in the party. Thanks again. Stay tuned to our next time that we meet, where we talk about what's next for the party in the new year.
Thanks, Drea. I look forward to our future conversations.
It's the end of the year, and Rebel News never could have made it this far without people like you. If you appreciate the journalism that we bring you, please consider being a part of what makes it possible by becoming a Rebel News Plus subscriber at rebelnewsplus.com. You'll get access to our exclusive documentaries, shows, and more, and help us continue to bring the public the other side of the story.